Hi, this is Stan Fitzgerald with Veterans for Trump and Legacy PAC. I'm here with Angie Wong, our national media rep, and Jeffrey Clark. Good morning, sir. How are you today?
Uh, I'm good, Stan. Thanks for having me.
Well, we appreciate you coming on and our Veterans Organization and Legacy PAC. Appreciate everything you've done for the country and are obviously, still in shock from what's happened in your case. And I'd like to turn this interview over to Angie Wong at this time.
Thanks a lot.
Hi, thank you for joining us, Mr. Clark. I just want to introduce you. You are the Director of Litigation for the Center of Renewing America. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, great. I have a few questions for you because we've had a lot happen in the news this week, and I want to hear your comments on this.
Sure.
Bernie Kerik, former police commissioner of New York City, had this to say yesterday. If a police officer or a state trooper falsified evidence and then used it to secure an arrest or prosecute someone, they would be charged with a civil rights violation and go to federal prison. I'm wondering if you think that this will be the fate of some of the architects from the Russia hooks that we saw within the Durham report this week.
So the way that works, Angie, is he's exactly right about state and local officials under 18 United States Code Section 242. But that does not apply to federal officials. So unfortunately, the only analog to that is a case called Bivens. And it's been, narrowly construed and kind of contained because Congress really should create a cause of action for federal officers who abuse their powers and engage in civil rights violations. Sadly, they've never done so. So the Supreme Court created this Bivens remedy directly under the Constitution, but it's very narrow. And I think the current Supreme Court, which would like to see if something like that's going to happen, Congress actually write the rules. They're probably not so happy that got authorized. So it's a good idea, and I can see why he would think of it, especially given his background. But sadly, the federal government doesn't operate under the same restrictions that state and local officials do.
But do you think that we should have that given what's occurred over the last several years? And what do you think? Will there be any criminal or civil suits that come from the Durham report?
So yes, I do think that there needs to be a congressional statute that does create remedies for people who are wronged by federal agents' misuses of their power and violations of people's constitutional rights. Certainly if your organization or other organizations were to call for that, I would, lend my voice of support to that. In terms of whether there will be any criminal consequences from the Durham report, I'd answer it in two ways. Number one, Durham himself, and I saw Barr in a Fox interview just overnight, basically say, look, Durham concluded he can't bring any charges. And, in other words, it didn't meet the standard of proof. I don't necessarily agree with that. I would want to look at all of the underlying facts he has in his files before I would ever agree with something like that. And I think we can also be confident that AG Garland is not going to override what Durham decided, which was not to bring anything. I think he's probably happy that that's what was Durham's decision. He'll hide behind that. So the issue is, will there be anything left that can be pursued within the relevant statute of limitations if a new Republican president takes office in 2025? So I think that, I wish I had better news for the members and others who might watch this, but I think that it is the kind of thing that would take, as I've recently said, a new presidential sheriff to come back into town.
Right. So you think by 2025, the statute of limitation would have long gone? There'll be no exceptions whatsoever, given the report just came out today, this week.
No, I mean, I think that's an issue that would have to be looked at that time. And I also think that it wouldn't be wise for, anyone who might conceivably go back in or go to for the first time to the Justice Department under a new Republican president to start prejudging the issue of either the underlying facts. I mean, I've called for AG Garland to sort of be summoned by the Weaponization Committee and put under oath as to whether he agrees with all the findings of fact that were made in the Durham report. I think that's a very valuable exercise. And the other thing is, I don't think any potential future Republican political appointee in the Justice Department should also be kind of prejudging the statute of limitations issue. I think that Angie, you and Stan and the members should know that there are various doctrines that extend statutes of limitations. There's always an issue as to when does a statute of limitations start, when does it end, is there anything that tolls it, and when does the statute of limitations sort of causes of action, as it were, accrue? Those all can be very complicated questions. So I would not want to say that all the statutes of limitations will clearly be dead by 2025. There might be views and arguments to be made that they have not run out.
Right. And so Jim Jordan's going to be bringing in Durham to testify next week, and we're going to hear him, and his team talk about this. We saw something similar. I would call it similar in up with the Hunter Biden laptop in 2020, and now we're seeing this thing with the DOJ requesting that the IRS basically reassign themselves to not investigate Hunter Biden's taxes. Now, we're seeing a lot of interference here. A lot of people are calling it election interference. Do you think we're going to see a repeat, or what are we expecting for 2024? Are we going to see more interference of this level?
So there are, I think, a lot of questions baked in there. I think that it's very hard to have a precise crystal ball of what's going to happen. We could take it in terms of Trump related issues and generic related issues. There are obviously a whole bunch of, in my view, witch hunts going on against the former president. We'll see what Jack Smith does with the federal ones that are pending. But let me revert to sort of things that relate to the Durham report, which is, I just watched an interview with Brett Baer, as the host and questioner of Bill Barr, the former attorney general. And, he was making this pitch of, well, I didn't want Durham necessarily to prosecute anyone. I just wanted him to get to the bottom of the facts. I find that very curious in multiple respects. First of all, there had already been an IG report about many of these issues, right? So the point of the special counsel regulations is not to duplicate the work of the IG. And second, Durham obviously did bring 3 prosecutions. He got one, I think, kind of low level, person that they'll probably try to say, is the only one who rose to the criminal level. This lawyer at the FBI, Kevin Kleinsmith. Then also cases were brought against Igor Danchenko, the fake, Russian informant who actually worked in the U.S. for the Brookings Institute, which needs a serious investigation. Believe me, the Brookings Institute has become very, very leftist and foreign infiltrated. And he got $220,000 from the FBI for the work, the useless work, the fake work that he was doing for them, Danchenko. And then also a prosecution was brought against Sussman. Both of those prosecutions failed. I don't think they necessarily failed because there weren't good cases to be made out based on my understanding of the facts, but because they were brought in DC, where you have just an overwhelming percentage of people who have one particular political mindset. And they saw, letting Danchenko and Sussman off for these, things as sort of part of like their political makeup. So, that's a good question, to pose and think about. Why did Durham bring cases against Sussman and Danchenko in the region of Washington, D.C.? Actually, as I think about it, I think one of them might have been in East. Virginia, but same basic point, because we're talking about suburban DC, not quite as stacked as DC itself, but in any
But
event.
what jurisdiction would he bring it to otherwise?
Well, that's another complicated question that in terms of any future Republican administration, I would not want to prejudge. But I would say that this is just a for instance, the wire fraud statute does not have a kind of very nailed down venue provision. So, if there's essentially a communication that's taking place, there are a wide range of fora in which it could be brought. So, I found it very curious that the cases were sort of only pursued in those places. Certainly, from a strategic perspective, all of the grand jury proceedings, for instance, that Jack Smith is conducting are in DC. So, he sees the advantage of that forum for his cases. Matthew Graves sees the advantage of that forum for the cases against the J6 defendants, et cetera. And, there's no reason not to think more broadly and more even-handedly about venue choices. Again, without any kind of form of prejudgment of whether there would be sufficiently colorable arguments for venue to be sought in other United States district courts.
Right. Okay. So do you think the Durham court has any effect whatsoever on some of the outstanding J6 cases happening right now? Do you see a relations between the two at all?
I mean, you would like to think that if there was a fair-minded person on that jury who, basically their steady diet was the mainstream media, maybe even MSNBC level mainstream media for many years, and they have a kind of inherent going in conditional or positional bias against the J6 defendants as conservatives, as Republicans, as so-called MAGA, that seeing CNN, seeing Jake Tapper say, look, this report is devastating to the FBI. This report is vindication, at least to some extent, for Donald Trump, that they might rethink, throwing the book at, someone, particularly if they were nonviolent. But obviously that's, something that's up to their individual conscience, and, they're obviously going to see the facts of particular cases. But I'd like to think that this report, right, particularly because it is getting some, renewed focus from CNN, the new CNN, which purports to be an attempt to return to the old CNN of less bias, that it might have an impact on people. But, we'll see how it shakes out, Angie.
Yeah, I think Chris Lynch tried to do that by bringing the Donald Trump hour last week, but then he got shot down by pretty much everybody who works there, right? So, yeah, no, I look forward to CNN returning back to its old Ted Turner days, where it's 24-hour eye-drying news. Well, you mentioned the word vindication, right, for President Trump. Last week, when you heard this report, did you feel vindicated at all?
Well, I think that the work that I did while I was at the Justice Department, and even, my desire to investigate the 2020 presidential election are, not like synced up at like 100% level with this, right? I mean, this is largely, the Durham report is largely a set of issues about the 2016 election.
Yeah.
But, as I pointed out on Twitter about that, right, the whole point of the Russiagate hoax was that Donald Trump was a Russian asset, and that the Russians interfered in the 2016 election to get Trump elected so they'd have a man in the White House, right? That's a complete lie, complete fiction, complete fantasy. But it was an attempt. It was the main attempt by Hillary Clinton to do two things. Number one, to use that to get him defeated. And then number two, to get Trump defeated and Hillary Clinton in, and then number two, to distract from her email scandal, right? So that was, the real election interference. And, I think that, there's a different kind of election interference going on in 2020. There are all kinds of, dimensions to that, like last minute changes to state law in violation of the U.S. Constitution's electors clause, violations of state election law that was on the books. I don't think it was the right decision, for instance, for the Supreme Court to refuse to take the Texas case against other states like blue states like Pennsylvania. Just on and on. There are lots of problems, but there's a kind of like what's the phrase, right? Like sometimes history rhymes. Like it's kind of like more like a history rhyming thing than it is a one-to-one mirror image thing between the 2016 election and the 2020 election.
But what about the 24 election? We're going to see history rhyme yet again. We're now trying to not look into the Biden's taxes and the foreign money that they've received, the family has received. And there's similar flavorings happening again. So what can we possibly do? Because clearly, people want heads to roll over this report, right? And we don't see a pathway legally to get there, to actually prosecute, to actually hold people accountable. I think that's where we are this week. Everyone's trying to figure out a pathway. And we also don't want this again to happen in 2024. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not, Angie, a political strategist. I'm, a lawyer who feels much more comfortable buried in my musty books, like what's behind me, or in Westlaw. So I can just give you kind of an educated layperson's view on the politics. I do think that some repeats are shaping up, right? I think we're seeing almost a mainstream media blackout on Representative Comer running the Oversight Committee's revelations about the many Biden family members who, magically through a web of companies are getting millions of dollars from foreign sources in China or in Romania. And we also know from information on the Hunter Biden laptop, which did get at least a lot of coverage in conservative circles, of that's going to be like 10% for the big guy, with obviously a lot of speculation being that the big guy is Biden himself. We see the media, to the extent they are talking about it, the mainstream media running interference in the sense of, it looks like the talking point they've settled on is that, the family members might be getting money, but there's no evidence that Joe Biden got any money from the new Comer, press conference, et cetera, right? That seems like, something of a fig leaf. Indeed, like it's so clear that they whip up these talking points and they go out almost like orders, that I'll tell you that within 24 hours of that becoming the Democrat talking point, I work on Capitol Hill. In the Capitol Hill region, there were, like posters, attached to various street signs making exactly that point, and showing Representative Comer with a cowboy hat on and saying, he's all hat and no cattle, because he doesn't have anything against Biden specifically. So, that's that kind of mainstream media. Like, they adopt a narrative, they press it, they try to make sure that narrative is very sticky and no one deviates from it. We're definitely seeing that being rolled out in advance of the 2024 campaign already.
Yeah. And we're going to be fighting that narrative all the way through. I want to thank you on behalf of Veterans for Trump and Veterans for America First for kind of being our cowboy, or for kind of helping us as well. And we want to be able to have your organization going forward. We've got a lot of work to do. I mean, leading up to 24, I'm already tired. And there's just so much stuff being thrown on the wall, and everyone, there's just it's already it's a big fight already, but we want to get it right this time. And I think the momentum is there. Every time they try to yank Trump back into the crab barrel, honestly, this guy, he's Teflon. He's got Teflon skin. He's outlasting everybody. So right now the direction feels really good for him, and we want to keep it that way. And if there's anything that the veterans can do to help you guys in your efforts, please do let us know.
Well, thanks, Angie. And look, veterans are the backbone of the country. And in my organization, we have two. Our Vice President Dan Caldwell is a former Marine, and Wade Miller is another Marine who runs all of our state efforts, especially in our 501c4. Just they're tremendous guys. They're committed to the country. They're committed to not seeing it go down to really, I'm sad to be this alarmist, but down a path of destruction. And that's been the mission of the Center for Renewing America, is to not just halt the decline and the destruction and the corruption and corrosion, but to try to get America back to where it once was, and what our armed forces members over the course of our history have served and bled and died for.
Jeff, our organizations are proud partners with CRA. But before I let you go, you have a legal defense fund. At Veterans for Trump, we would like to help steer people to it. How can they find that?
So, well, thanks for that, Stan. I appreciate that. Really, it's touching. So I'm at Give, Send, Go at Jeff Clark. You can find me there pretty easily with Google search.
Okay.
And you would see my picture. You would see mention of me being a former Trump Justice Department official, et cetera, on that Give, Send, Go.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for your service. Thank you, Angie, and look forward to talking to you both soon.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Stan. Thanks, Angie.
Well, bye-bye now.